First portion, thank you. The first portion of this, I will be covering Qualtrics, how to start a survey in Qualtrics, basic survey flow, and how to connect it to SONA and how to export and view your data. And then I will switch over to Kaylin, who will be covering connecting Qualtrics to Prolific and overall just navigating Prolific. So we will get started. Let me share our PowerPoint here. Sure, she's in presenter. I'll just have to do it. Oh, there we go. All right, so this is an introduction to survey platforms. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to just stop me or send it in the chat, whatever you prefer. So first, we will cover the basics of Qualtrics, how to create a survey, how to utilize survey flow, different question types, all that fun stuff. And then we will, and then we're going to cover how to connect Qualtrics to SONA and how to view, export, and view your data. And then we will cover linking Qualtrics to Prolific and how to the basics of navigating Prolific. So why use Qualtrics? Qualtrics is a survey program provided to APC students for free, and it's one of the most widely used, widely used survey softwares across most psychology programs across the US. So it wouldn't just be here that you'd be using it if you're looking into PhD programs. Anywhere else, Qualtrics is heavily used. Also, you can access your Qualtrics account by signing in using your ASU ID. And why would you use Qualtrics? You can link it with SONA Research Participation System or Amazon MTurk, depending on if you're gathering community samples or student samples, and I will show you how to connect it to SONA. You can work collaboratively on surveys with your advisor and or peers, and I will also show you how to share your surveys and make them collaborative, give permissions. And it has great and quick tech support. If you have any questions with programming or if your survey is not working the way you want it to, they have a quick chat service. They also have a quick phone service. They will call you within the hour and walk you through anything you need. So they're a great system to utilize. So how to begin? If you wanted to log into your ASU Qualtrics, you have to use your ASU ID. And you cannot log in through the regular Qualtrics site. You have to log in specifically through ASU's Qualtrics site. We don't have profiles on Qualtrics itself. It has to be through ASU. I recommend looking up ASU Qualtrics in Google, and then after signing in, bookmarking that page so you don't have to search it every single time. So it should look something like this in the screenshot. When you log into Qualtrics, it will likely not have surveys like this if you don't have surveys yet, but when you do open Qualtrics, it should look something like this. So on the left, you'll have your projects, and these will be your prior or current studies. It'll have them by name, whether they're active, meaning you're currently collecting data. Usually the active symbol is within the last week you've had somebody take this survey, and it'll tell you how many responses you have and when you last modified it. Over here are your folders. You can create these and organize how you want your projects. So for example, if you're doing multiple pilot studies, like the one that says legal bias there, we did like 3 different pilots, you're gonna wanna keep those all in one. You can also put scales in your library, and I can show you how to import those later. So if you use a scale multiple times, you don't have to put it in the Qualtrics more than once. And over here is where you would create a new project. For our purpose, you would choose projects from scratch, and that's how most ways you're going to do it, because they do have templates, but often they're not for our research purposes in psychology. They're more based off marketing or like marketing, customer satisfaction, those kind of deals. And they're usually set in a certain way. You would have to alter quite a bit. So it's easier to just start from scratch. When you click survey, this is what you'll be presented with. So you want to name your project something informative. I recommend making it something distinct, because if you were often when you're in psychology, you are studying something in a certain context or studying a certain topic, but you're going to be studying different aspects of that topic. So you want to make it something informative so you don't confuse your surveys. Here, you can designate what folder, if you created a folder, where you want it to go, so it's organized. And then For this purpose, you wouldn't create a blank survey project, but they do have templates you can use in future, like the ones that I mentioned earlier. So when you create your survey, this is what you'll get. This is, there's a lot to go over here, so we'll break it down one by one. Here is your question block. Blocks kind of act like the outline of your survey. Each block would be a different page in your survey, and clicking those little 3 dots in the corner gives you the option to preview, move, or delete the block. If you preview the block, it'll show you what it's going to look like in your survey. You can move it, when you click move, you can move it above or below other blocks in your survey, or you can delete the block. Here, you name the block, and those do not show in the survey, so it does not matter what you name them. It only shows up if you do a certain viewing order for your surveys, but that's beyond our purposes here. But normally I recommend naming it something informative, but it's not the end all be all because it will not show up in your data set, that name. However, where it says Q1B1, that is your question name. It is absolutely crucial that you do name this something informative, as this is what the column will be named when you export and view your data. And you want to make sure it differs from other questions, because otherwise the default for Qualtrics is that they will add random letters to the end of that survey name. So if I had Q1B1 across the board, it would be Q1B1A, Q1B1B, and that just becomes a coding nightmare. The questions, the default is multiple choice, but if you click that little arrow right here, the little drop-down menu, there are multiple different question types you can put. We will go over those in a bit. You can choose whether you want one answer to be the right answer or allow people to choose multiple answers. And you can, the number of choices chooses how many options they have, especially in a multiple choice, whether they have a yes, no, or multiple. And edit multiple, the blue text under the number of choices, allows you to edit multiple. If you have yes, no, maybe, you can alter these all at once rather than going individually. So in that text box, you can put line by line what you want instead of editing every single one. And then formatting lets you change the display. So you can choose whether you want it to be a list, if you want it vertical, or if you want it horizontal. So if you have a Likert scale, you can choose to have it horizontal rather than vertical. These are the different question types. So when you click that little drop down, the little blue arrow right there, these are the different types of questions you can get. Text entry, participants will enter their response. So you can choose how long as well. You can even edit the size of the box if you choose that one. So if you don't want participants writing you an essay, you can put a limit. Text graphic, it just shows that, it just shows them an image. There's nowhere for them to respond. You would have to add another question below if you wanted them to respond. Text graphic is just to put an image, but if you want them to respond to that image, you would add another question below it. A matrix table are for Likert style scales. They're also for if you want to do bipolar adjective scales, meaning if you wanted to say rate somebody on whether they were trustworthy or not trustworthy, it would be a matrix style where it'd be across the board and you could rate across. Slider are sliding scale responses. So if you do 0 from 10% or 100%, you can slide a scale onto what your answer you want it to be. CAPTCHA, if I'm sure that logging or creating accounts on a website, you've probably encountered CAPTCHA before, but you can choose what the question you want it to be, and it often helps prevent bots. I highly recommend adding it to your surveys because especially on programs like Amazon MTurk, bots can bypass the system and you do not want bots responses. And then timing. Timing, I think, is a very important feature. Timing can record how long a participant spends on a page, but it's also very good for if you have stimulus materials that are videos or something you want to make sure your participant pays attention to. You can force where they cannot advance until they stay on the page for a certain amount of time. And then you could also make it where it auto advances them after a certain amount of time. So say if they're watching a video and you don't want them to rewatch it, you can set it where it's as long as the advance is as long as the video. So they can't proceed until they watch the video, but you can set the auto advance maybe 10 seconds after that. So they have to automatically advance afterwards and they can't rewatch the stimulus more than once. So it's great if you have long instructions, especially those of us who are in psych and law. If you have really long, tedious jury instructions, it's a good way to make somebody stay on the page, even though that might seem a little torturous. I promise it is perfect for your studies and needed when you need people to really engross themselves in your studies. So some important features, when you click to name, after you name your question, when you click to actually type in your question, there's this little blue box that'll say rich content editor. The rich content editor is very good for changing text size, font size. The default for Qualtrics is this grayish color, and I highly recommend changing it to more solid black color because it might be hard to see. Or if you want to color code some text to help people follow better, a vignette or something along those lines, when you click rich content editor, this is what it'll show. So you can change the font size, the font type. You can put, this is also a place you can put in video clips instead. If you see the little reel option there, you can insert photos, you can insert tables, bulleted lists. It's basically the similar format to like Microsoft Word. Another important feature when you click when you're entering your question in the sidebar, there's an option called question behavior. And this is how to create conditions. So if you have participants answer a certain way, if they choose a specific response, you can choose display logic, which means they'll be displayed a certain question only if they answer a certain way on the question previously. Skip logic is good if they answer a certain way and you want them to skip a series of questions based on their answer. Carry forward choices would carry forward their choices from previous, if you have them enter another condition from previous, so this would be good for pre and post tests, or if you wanted to remind them of the response. Recode values is just if you want to change their response from a text response to a numeric response, and that would show up on your data set. And JavaScript is just for entering if you want to enter some type of certain embedded links. And then default choices is just if they don't answer, do you want them to give a default choice? Oh, and I skipped choice randomization. Choice randomization just means that if you had a question saying, what's your favorite color? And it was red, blue, green, yellow. Red, blue, green, yellow would be in a different order for each participant. It just randomizes the order of their answer choices. Survey flow. You would click this, there's this little, under the little clipboard icon, there's these two bar icons, that is your survey flow. Survey flow allows you to change the order of your blocks and create different conditions for different participants. So this is good when you have between subjects designs and you want participants to go to different groups. We'll go over this a little bit more detail. But some of the most important features is embedded data. Embedded data is used to create conditions. You can name something group and then set a value for each group. Branch is if you want people to branch off into different conditions, depending on what group they're assigned to. So you would assign the group numbers in embedded data, and then branch would actually send them off. It would branch them off into those different groups. So you would put group equals 1, and then they would get that condition. And then randomizer allows you to randomize the order of what participants see. So if you send them off into that group, you can randomize what order they get, whatever questions in that set. And then collaborating. This is one of the most important things, especially because your advisors will likely want to look at your Qualtrics surveys before you publish them, or if you're working with others. You would click, when you're in that dashboard on that opening page, when you open Qualtrics, there are 3 little dots next to your surveys. You would click those 3 little dots and there is an option to collaborate. It'll open a text box where often you can type faculty, you'll be able to type in their name and it'll show up and you can add them. For students, you might need their email and then you choose permissions, whether they're allowed to publish, if they're only allowed to edit, what have you. And then distributions. So this is a good way, this is important for how to connect your survey to SONA or just get a link to publish it on Mturk or Craigslist, wherever you. So when you're creating your survey, there is a little box called distributions on the line where it says survey. You would click distributions and then you would click get a single reusable link. And then once you copy and paste that link, it's good for linking Qualtrics to SONA, which is our next topic. Most of you will want to take advantage of ASU's research participation system, SONA, because it is free and students in the research participation pool can see your study, take your study. So the first step you want to take is back in that survey flow, that embedded data block, you can add it wherever you want. It can be in the beginning of your survey flow, the end of your survey flow, it does not matter, but you have to name it ID. And then where it says So you can just click where that little green fill-in will have a default name. You would just change that to ID. And then when you copy the link to your survey under distributions, you'll paste that in SONA. When you want to reach that in SONA, you would go to study information where you edit your study information, and then go to study URL, and you would paste the URL to your study. But under that study information, and Qualtrics also has this, and SONA has this as well, this question mark ID jumble that you have to add at the end of your survey URL. You would just have to copy and paste. After you copy and paste your link to your survey, you would just copy and paste that to the end of that URL in SONA. And that's that ID in your embedded data. This is so they link to each other. And then when you go back to your survey, and this is important if you're using mTurk or cloud research or any type of distribution where you want people to get credit, at the end of your survey, it always has this end of survey block. And you can change what people see, and you can redirect them to a URL. And this is also the same process you would use for Amazon mTurk, any cloud research. So when you click that box at the end of your survey, there is a messaging option. And when you click the drop down on you want to click redirect to URL. And then when you click the redirect to URL, you're going to copy and paste that link from SONA that has that question mark ID survey code that you put into your view, into your study information, and you're going to paste that to for the website URL for your redirect to URL. That way, when participants reach the end of your survey, they get redirected back to SONA. It'll also be available on your main page on SONA, where it says the view study website. That Qualtrics redirect to URL is right there as well, and I highly recommend using that one instead of going back into your study information, and you would just copy and paste that. And then now, when you look at your survey where it says the end of the survey, if it works successfully, it should say respondents will be directed back to ASU SONA systems. And that's how you know it worked correctly. If you also look online, when you type in connect Qualtrics to SONA, the very first option also has a PDF documentation from SONA Participation Systems that shows you how to do this step by step as well. So if you don't remember this from today, it'll be the first option when you look this up on Google. And now once you have participants and you want to view your data, you would go to data and analysis from that top tab bar. So it's next to distributions. When you click export and import, you're going to want to click export data to view your data. And it's going to give you a few options when you click export data. You can choose your how you want it. Usually the default you would do is a CSV, which is going to open in Excel. And I recommend using numeric values versus choice text, because if you have text answers, when you use numeric values, it automatically recodes it to 1 and 2 or 3. So if you had a question saying, what is your gender? If you click use numeric values, it'll make it 1 for female and 2 for male, what have you. Or if you do use choice text, it'll say quotation male, quotation female. So it's easier to use numeric values. If you click more options, there's options like exporting the viewing order. So what order participants got their questions in, etc. But I highly recommend just sticking the CSV instead of the SPSS file, the TSV Excel. They don't download quite as correctly as the CSV. The CSV gives you the most data. So some just basic tips before we switch over to connecting Qualtrics to Prolific. Your survey auto saves and updates in real time, so you do not have to save your survey. It saves it for you. It's basically like having auto save OneDrive. There's no way to save it otherwise. So it does save on its own. You can save blocks and questions to your library for future use. So this is great for scales or individual difference measures that you're going to use over and over again, because you're not going to want to have to copy and paste those every single time. And always name your blocks as well as your questions, because this will make data collection and cleaning a lot easier. So now I'm going to switch over to Kaylin, who's going to go over linking Qualtrics surveys to Prolific.
Hi, everyone. You might want to turn me down, kindly. Okay, so another platform used to get participants is Prolific. This is similar to SONA, however, it pays the participants, so they're not necessarily just college students. It can be used for a broader range of participants. So if you want a more diverse sample. So first, what you have to do is sign up to be a researcher. So it'll say right here, sign up for research. You don't have to use your ASU account, but feel free to use your ASU email. So once you create an account, on the left side, you can see the option to create a new study where you can add your information about your study and link your Qualtrics survey. You can also see your past completed surveys on the completed tab. And before you collect your data, you actually need to top up your account. So this is where you add funding to pay your participants. So when you click on the creating a new study tab, and here's some of the beginning things that you do, but I'm actually going to do a quick walkthrough with you on the Prolific website. So it can be a little bit easier to understand. So first, you add a title to your study. So this is what your participants are going to see. So you should add a longer, maybe more descriptive title. And then here's where you add just a short title for only you to see. In the next block, you briefly describe what type of questions your participants will be asked or what information that they will be asked about. And then you click which devices is best for taking your study. For example, if you are asking participants to screenshot their screen time on their iPhones, you're going to want to do mobile instead of desktop. But so you just pick whichever works best for your certain survey. Also, if audio, camera, microphone, or downloading software is going to be necessary. This is where you actually link your Qualtrics, link your survey right here. And we discussed it earlier of how to get that link and where to put it. This is where Prolific is different than SONA. So right here, this is what I have been instructed to do, is for participants to receive credit, they have to record their Prolific IDs. So what I did was I added a question in the at the beginning of my survey for them to put in their Prolific IDs. And then also for them to receive credit for completing your survey, they have to put down a code. So I also selected, I'll give them a code. And you will copy and paste this code and put it at the end of your survey. And I have a few examples in a later slide. This next section is optional, but it is really helpful if you have any requirements for your study. So if you want it to just have people inside the United States, or so you would click pre-screen participants and say we wanted someone who's living abroad. So we would click living abroad and then just click the requirements, or say someone who has a vaccine, and then you would apply it. So then that is automatically going to remove anyone who is outside of the United States and who has not been vaccinated. So any requirements you might have, this is really, really great to go ahead and filter out some of the people from your study. And finally, this is where you can calculate the cost of how much money you're going to need to run this study. So say I need 200 participants and my study is going to take about 10 minutes to do. So you would, and typically it just kind of depends on how much funding you have, but you typically want to stay in the good range to make sure that you have participants that are going to pass attention checks and so forth. So you would need a total of 424. And then you can also mess with it and, kind of go around and kind of Yeah, so that's how you'll be able to tell if how much money is necessary. Okay, I'm gonna pop back over to here. Okay. So for the prolific requirements, this is as I told you before, this is where you add the URL, and I select, I have been told to click, I'll add a question in my study, and then the completion code, copy and paste. And here's kind of what it looks like. So as you can see, question 2, this I put right after my consent form in Qualtrics. So they just put their prolific ID right away. And this was one of my last questions. And they'll take the prolific completion code and put it into prolific, and that will ensure that they get credit for taking the survey. This is where you top up your account so you can add funds to make sure that participants will get paid, and you cannot run your study until you have the money in your Qualtrics or your prolific account. And then completed survey. So once all participants have taken your study, you can view the results by clicking completed surveys on the left hand of the dashboard. It will show you how many participants took your study, how long it took them, how much they got paid, and all of kind of the demographics. And next, you have to approve all of them to make sure that they, right here, to make sure that they receive funding. And then to obtain the actual data results, you return back to Qualtrics and download your data as we discussed in prior slides. And then the fun data cleaning begins. Yay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And please let us know if you have any questions.
Also, this PowerPoint will be posted on the SAM Lab website, so you can refer back if there's any steps you want to go back over. Yeah. If we don't have any questions, thank you for all attending, and this PowerPoint will be posted soon, and you can refer back if you need to.
Thank you.
Thank you.